Trig Pre-College, Trig Graphs. There's two key features to trig graphs, the sine graph, the cosine graph, and all those, but specifically sine and cosine, is the concepts of amplitude, which I will get a pen, amplitude, and period. But first, let's talk about amplitude. You see this equation, y equals 2 sine half x. Well, all trig equations have a standard form of y equals a sine bx, where a is the coefficient of sine, in this case 2, and b is the coefficient of x, which in this case is a half. Your amplitude equals the absolute value of a. And so the amplitude for this problem would be the absolute value of 2, which is 2. And amplitude is basically height. If we were to type this into our calculator, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff in our calculator for this chapter, especially the trig graph stuff. But if we type this to our calculator, we would see it would look like a, just draw a rough sketch here. Here's your graph, here's the sine curve. It would be going as high as 2 and as low as -2. But our amplitude is our height. So how high does the wave go? And in this case, it's 2. And so basically, it's the number here. But you have to do absolute value, because even if this was y equals -2 sine x, your amplitude would still be +2. Because a -2 sine x graph would simply look like that. It would go down first, but it would still go as high as 2. So your amplitude is always going to be a positive number. It's a positive height. Even if you start down first, you will eventually go up. And so that is amplitude. What is the amplitude of the function shown here? Now this one can be a little deceiving. See if this is multiple choice. On the bottom it is. Because you see this and you think, all right, it would be 6. But notice that it's not centered on the x-axis like it usually is, these waves. And so when it's not centered on the x-axis, you want to draw in a line in the middle, a line that I call the midline, like right here. See how that's the graph that it's going above and below and above, and it's a wave bouncing up and down from this line. When we talk about amplitude, we talk about height above that. And so even though we're going as high as 6, your amplitude here would only be 2. So amplitude is height, but you do need to be careful that when it's not on the x-axis to draw in your own kind of a midline to determine your amplitude from there. So that's amplitude. It's pretty easy. Period is the other really most notable thing here. Now I mentioned there was, bx here. B doesn't stand for amplitude. B stands for frequency. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about period. But the frequency is like how many waves you have. So if we're looking at a graph that goes to 360 or 2 pi, something that'd be 1 sine curve, that'd be 2 sine curves, that's really a terrible drawing. Let me try to do that better. It's 1 sine curve, that's 2 sine curves, something like that. This would be y equals sine 2x, because it has 2 complete waves, because that's a complete sine wave. That's a complete cosine wave. But this is a complete sine wave. And so we see that I complete that one wave here, and then I have a second one here. So the coefficient of x stands for frequency, and it tells us how many waves we have. But the period is more important than the frequency. And period is where that first cycle ends. And we have a formula that you need to remember for period. And that goes 2 pi divided by b, the frequency. So 2 pi over b, which is what the answer is here. But this is the formula we're going to use. And that tells us where the first cycle ends. Because if you think about it, 2 pi is, our interval that we're looking at. So divided by how many waves you have tells you where the first one ends. So like 2 pi divided by 2 would be pi in this case, which is where the first cycle would end. But this is really the formula you really need to remember, is 2 pi divided by your frequency, which is the b value in the equation. We'll see a couple more examples of that right now. So what is the period of the graph? Well, my b term is 2. So 2 pi divided by b is 2 pi divided by 2, which is simply pi. 5. What is the period of 2 sine third x? Now this 2 is for the amplitude, which is the third I want here. So 2 pi divided by third, and we don't like dividing by fractions, so we multiply by the reciprocal, and that's going to give you 6 pi. So if your b term is ever a fraction, that you may have to end up doing this whole times reciprocal thing. So amplitude, frequency, period, but notably amplitude and period are really the key features here. So I want to do just a couple of quick examples of, well, they're going to give us these pictures and say, what's the equation? Well, first of all, we do have a graphing calculator here. So I will be using this, but let me just do this one first without that. You really do need to know what the basic sine and cosine graphs look like. Sine is that, and cos is that. And the key difference is, notice that sine starts at the origin. Cosine starts at your amplitude. So we see here, this is starting at our amplitude, so automatically we know it's a cosine function. So it's either going to be B or C. What is the amplitude? The amplitude is 2, so that's why it's 2 cos x, and the answer would be B. The real basic, easy versions of ones like this, you really don't even need your calculator for. But let me show you what we can do in our calculator. That if I type this into my y equals screen. Now, first of all, I want to check a couple of things. I want to see if my mode, see how I'm on radians. That's okay. You can put it on degrees, but it's okay being on radians right now. Because notice that my x-axis is in radians, so that's fine there. But my y equals, let's type in 2 cos x. So I'm typing in what I think the answer is. Now, if I hit graph, it's not going to look, it actually looks okay. But I want to adjust my window to look like this window. So the first thing I want to do is hit the zoom button. And then number 7 here is trig. So zoom 7. And that brings it in a little bit. But I could also go further. Notice that this is only here. Now maybe this is enough to get it, but you could adjust what is your window. X min, X max. Actually, let me go ahead and change my mode to degrees. I think you'll understand things a little bit better there. But remember that these are just 90, 180, 270, 360. All right, so that's there. Let me go back to my window. Okay, so my window, I'm going to set my y values here, my x values, sorry, to go from what I see in this window. I'm going from 0 to 360. So let me change my x values in my window to go from 0 to 360. And hopefully that works out and gives us a picture that looks a little bit better. And it does. So you could always adjust your window. Remember, your x min and your x max is your x axis, so adjust it to match the picture. And your y min and your y max are these. Never mess with the x scale or the y scale. Always leave those what they are. Okay, but this problem was done pretty easily by just clearly seeing its cosine, looking at the amplitude, and that's it. The other cosine answer here was 2x, not 2 cos. This would be a frequency of 2, not an amplitude of 2. All right, how about this one? So first of all, is it sine or cosine? And remember, the key there is that sine crosses the origin, cosine does not. I am crossing the origin. So I know it's sine, so that rules this out. Secondly, what's the amplitude? How high does this graph go? It's 2. So I'm looking for 2 sine. Then the only question is 2x or half x? And, well, I can explain it to you, but let's type them in here. So let's go y equals, I'll try this first one, 2 sine 2x graph. But now I'm having another problem where my window is not matching my picture. So what I want to do is, what's happening on my window here? I'm going from negative 2 pi to positive 2 pi. In degrees, that's equivalent to, oh, sorry, didn't want that all the way up there. Negative 360 to positive 360. And that'll give me a picture comparable to my x-axis here. But that doesn't quite look right, does it? Is that quite the same thing? I don't think so, but let me check my other answer, choice C. That is 2 sine half x. So 1 divided by 2x. Let me try that one. That looks a little bit better. And remember what that half means. That half means that I have a frequency of a half. And frequency, when we talk about frequency, we're always talking about in the 0 to 2 pi range. So in this range here, how much of the sine curve do you have? You have half of the sine curve. So that's why it's half right there. But you could always just type it into your calculator and compare pictures. One more quick one. See, it's going through the origin, so it's definitely sine. Okay. All right, they're all sine. I have an amplitude of a half. So I'm looking for half sine, not 2 sine. And how many waves do I have when I get to 2 pi? That is 1 wave and 2 waves. So I have half amplitude, frequency of 2. Type it into my calculator, verify the picture works, and that's trig graphs. See ya.